Before
due
you
to
start the
government
meeting, can I make
guidance.
a point?
Sorry, who's interrupting?
It's Bill. It's Councillor Hancock's.
The hands are up.
I'll allow it, but we'll do hands up.
No, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
No, I was trying to get in, but I hadn't unmuted. I just want to make one point because it's mentioned about the chat. Is I'm not included on that because I wasn't included as a member of the panel, so I can't see any chat. Just a point for another time. Might have to think about it.
Well, that's fine. I'm sure that we can work that out, but I'd like to continue with the announcements, please. Due to government guidance on social distancing and the COVID-19 virus, this meeting will be live streamed and recorded for later publication on the council's website. We've received apologies from Councillor Glass. Whether he's able to join us at a later point, I'm not sure. If so, I'm happy for him to take over chairmanship of the meeting. I'd like to move on to point 3, the minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of January as attached? Yeah, who's raised, who's indicated?
It's me, yeah.
Oh, Bill, yes?
Yeah, I'm substituted for Sarah Doughty, so but her apologies as well.
That's fine, thank you. Yeah, have we got any issues or objections? Can I get a seconder for the minutes of the previous meeting? Well, one person's raised their hand. I'm just trying to...
That's Chair. Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pomfret. In that case, we'll move on to declarations of interest and party whip. To receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct in the Party Whip, in accordance with overview and scrutiny procedure rules 4E, paragraph 16B. Have we got any that aren't on the list? I've got 2 people raising their hands. I can see Councillor Hancock's again. You raised your hands, Councillor Hancock's.
I did. I need to declare that my daughter is an employee of the Borough Council.
That's okay. I've got a couple more which I'm trying to access. It's not allowing me to switch to anybody other than Councillor Pomfret, Councillor Hancock's and Philip Richardson. So I'm not able to see who everybody else is.
I am indicating, Chairman. John Beaumont.
Okay, Councillor Beaumont.
Yes, Chairman. I'm no longer a member of the board of the Balkington Village Centre. I'm sure the paperwork will catch up with the facts in the end, but I resigned a week or 2 ago. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Beaumont. I did see one more hand up. Who was that?
Kyle Evans.
Okay, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, just to let you know, if you click show conversation, which is next to the hand, and you should be able to see the list of members and whether they've got their hand up. But in relation to my interests, it states I'm employed by the House of Commons. That should read UK Parliament, and that I've checked my interests, and it does state in the submitted interests UK Parliament and not House of Commons. The two are slightly different. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's an important legal distinction. I've seen one more hand raised. Have we got any more hands raised, or is this it? Okay, well, in that case, I'll assume there's no more. On to public consultation. Public participation will be by written submissions only for this meeting. Have we had any through, Wendy?
Yes, we have. We've had one public statement through, which Philip Richardson has, and we'll read out at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 6, monitoring of the grounds maintenance contract. Just getting onto the appropriate page for this.
Apologies, Chair. We also have a speaker on this item.
Oh!
Councillor Brown.
Excellent. All right. Councillor Brown, I will allow you to speak. Have we got the timer for Councillor Brown?
It is usual that we have the presentation before we bring in public speakers.
I see. That's fine. I wasn't briefed on this meeting because I was unaware.
No.
So who is giving the presentation for this?
The presentations, David Truslove.
All right, David, if you could start on that, please, we'd appreciate it. I see one raised hand, which I'll allow.
Yes, point of order, Chair. I'm reliably informed that the live stream actually hasn't happened, and it does state in our constitution that we record meetings. And can we just have clarification that the live stream actually has happened?
Absolutely, this is concerning. I've got a message from Peter Bailick saying that the meeting is now streaming live. Peter, could you please confirm this? I'm on my phone for this Zoom meeting, so I'm unable to check it myself without coming out of the meeting. Philip, if Peter can't hear us, is there a way that you can check for us that we are indeed live as we should be?
I was just going to say, Chair, that Kelly can contact Peter through the chat. So, Kelly, can you just ask Peter to confirm that the meeting is going out live?
Without coming out of the meeting?
Yes, I will.
Out of curiosity, is there a reason why Peter isn't on the call himself?
It's a technical issue, Chair.
Philip, if Peter
in order to
can't
stream
hear us,
it, he
is there a way that you can
slightly
check for us
different
that we
program
are
to the one that
indeed
we're in.
live as we should be?
To I was going to say to Chair that
YouTube,
Kelly, so it's for that reason that he can't be in the meeting.
I understand.
The meeting is actually being live streamed.
Sorry,
Oh.
Megan?
I'm just saying the meeting is being live streamed. I can confirm that I'm watching it.
All right, so that's verified.
Okay, so it
Thank
is. We are. I have to say, Chair, just for your benefit, we do have to maintain the live stream for the whole of the meeting. If at any point we do lose live stream, we have to stop the meeting because the meeting immediately becomes unlawful if we don't live stream it. So it's absolutely critical.
And I'll be notified if that's the case immediately.
Yeah, and I have to say, part of the reason that Megan is here from IT is to keep an eye on that, as well as Peter, to let us know that if it does drop out, then we will be told.
Thank you, Megan. In that case, I'll refer to you immediately if there's any concerns about the health of the stream. All right, so now that we've got that confirmed, I would like to hear David's presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, since we last reported to the panel in September of last year, the 3 previous grounds maintenance contracts that were based on a performance specification came to an end at the end of October and have been replaced by a new single grounds maintenance contract, which is frequency based, commencing 1st of November. I just draw your attention, panel, to items within the report itself. You'll be aware that there's at Appendix 1, there's a mobilisation document that details a lot of the work that was undertaken by our former colleague Paul in mobilising the new contract. There are 2 items which are currently showing as amber on that mobilisation chart. The first related to the requirement to bring all horticultural features into line with the new specification, GM99. At the time the report was written, obviously that work was ongoing and was due to be completed within the first year of the contract, but obviously with COVID-19 that has had an impact on that. However, it should be noted that this element is being undertaken by the contractor at no cost to the council. The second item relates to the development and implementation of the the CRM firm step interface. I know we've had some difficulties with obviously arranging for the training by our colleagues at Glendale, by our team, and I understand that they are currently testing as we speak. That is ongoing at the moment, and we hope to have that system live within the next couple of weeks. Looking at item 5 on the customer satisfaction ratings, you'll note that obviously the reports there show particularly high ratings. That's based on the number of returns that we received, and as a result, we are currently looking at trying to develop some new arrangements to make that more meaningful going forwards. In terms of the monitoring performance between the formal and housing areas and the informal areas, The distinction there is somewhat explained by the number of operations that are assessed at the time of the monitoring. Typically on formal areas, you would undertake significantly more operations than you would on an informal area. And that in turn has an impact where an operation has not been performed. It has a greater percentage of an impact on the informal sites. And finally, on item 6, it refers to a summary of the rectification and defaults, which is there for members to see.
All right, that's the full report.
That is a report at this time, yes.
Excellent. Thank you for that, David. I'd like to invite questions from the panel for David, as we usually do. Have we got any raised hands? 2 raised hands. Trying to access those. Oh, I've got Councillors Evans and Councillor Sargent, is that correct?
So, sorry, Chair. Councillor Brown did indicate that he wanted to speak for 3 minutes before you go into the debate. I don't know whether you want to take Councillor Brown now.
Yes, absolutely. We'll take him now.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start here, I'd just like to thank David Truslove for his presentation and for all the help he's given in sorting out a number of issues in the past few months. I'd like that recorded, thank you. But overall, I'm absolutely incredulous that the panel has been presented with information suggesting that the resident satisfaction levels with Glendale's performance consistently exceed 90%. This claimed performance is utterly at odds with what my ward residents tell me on an almost daily basis. Almost daily I get calls from residents about aspects of ground maintenance, whether this be areas where the grass is now knee-high before it's cut, where edges have not been trimmed properly to leave a neat appearance, or edges that mysteriously were missed from the new contracts. To give a couple of examples, the bridle path that leads from the lawns into Small Lane was missed from the new contract. It took calls from residents and emails from myself to get this cleared. I've also had a resident who was picking up litter himself in Heckley Park because the bins were overflowing. He was approached by a Glendale worker at the site, and when he asked him if he'd come to help pick up the litter, the operator told him no, he was there to cut the grass at the cricket pitch. And we're not actually playing cricket due to COVID-19, which seems utterly bizarre. But then the employee went on to offer the resident a larger bag so he could collect more bottles and cans himself. Just seems to be odd, given that they're there. We also had an area of open space between Lawrence Road and Grant Road, again missed from the contract. 3 weeks of chasing to get it done. Then we come to look at the format of the questionnaire that goes out and the methodology that's used. The questionnaire is the sort of thing that you would issue if you're not really interested in what people think. It's a box ticking exercise as far as I'm concerned. The sort of thing you might see in the sort of Marxist regimes of Venezuela or China perhaps, where you assume that a resident who doesn't respond is a positive response, where in fact they're just a nil response. I mean, this is not Russia. It's not even Tower Hamlets, for goodness sakes. So let's have a bit of honesty about the way we treat our residents. So I mean, we could do a much better job by sending out pulse surveys or having surveys online that in ways that actually suit residents so that they can interact with us in ways that suit them, and they can tell us about the way they view the state of their area, the work that's been done. And at least, even if it makes uncomfortable reading to begin with, we'll end up with some data that we can actually use to drive improvement. This committee, it's got it in its power to improve this situation. So I would ask that the committee recommends that customer satisfaction system we have now is ditched entirely and replaced with a better system.
Councillor Brown. If not, I'll allow him to continue, but I heard a alarm clock sound.
Yes, Chair, that's the 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Well, I was only going to say let's have an independently delivered and monitored system that can be verified properly.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brown. Now that we've had our public contribution, I'd like to open it up to the panel to ask some questions, and I've got 2 raised hands, and I'm going to try and access those. Okay, who raised their hands?
Me, Kyle Evans.
Councillor Evans, and we had one more. I'll take Councillor Evans first now.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got numerous things I'd like to say regarding this report. So to make it easier, I'm just going to do it all together rather than having to just keep muting and unmuting. So I have numerous questions that I'd like to put to the head of the Parks Department. First of all, for nearly 6 months now, there's been a tree in the Park Road Cemetery in Bedworth which has fallen. I'd like to know when Glendale intend to remove that tree because I've been contacted by numerous local residents to complain about it. My second question, is it part of the contract for Glendale to pick litter up from areas they are likely to cut before they actually do cut it? I'm coming across a lot of areas across my ward which have been cut to a decent standard but is completely strewed with litter because Glendale haven't picked the litter up before they cut the grass. So if it's not part of the contract, could I ask why the council did not include it in the contract during the original tendering process? Third point, last summer I requested that Glendale remove a shrub from Sealand Drive as part of the shrub removal scheme. It took Glendale nearly 6 months to remove the said shrub. Can you assure me that the Parks Department regularly monitors Glendale regarding the shrub removal scheme so we can make sure that the shrubs that the council requests are removed are actually removed and are done on time? Fourth point, do you accept that the longer the grass, the more cuttings you're likely to get? If so, do you therefore accept this means more cuttings across the roads and paths when Glendale do cut areas? You know, there's areas in my ward, and I completely accept that you know, COVID has contributed to this. But it hasn't happened just this year. It also happened last year, where you know areas where the grass is 2 to 3 foot high, and then when Glendale does cut it, because it doesn't collect the cuttings, it ends up all over the roads and paths afterwards. Fifth point, when we had the training on the Glendale Live microsite before Christmas, I asked the council about creating a new internal online system where residents could report Glendale related matters directly to the council, a sort of similar website to fixmystreet.com. I was told at that meeting that the said website was about to launch within the next few weeks. Obviously we're 6 months down the line and I haven't heard anything about that, so could I possibly have an update please on that? I noticed from the report that there was a substantial increase in rectification notices in October of 2019, and of course I strongly welcome the fact that the council is issuing lots of rectification notices, but I just wondered if you could possibly give an explanation as to why there was a substantial increase in that specific month. I've got a question regarding page 15, the monitoring performance, formal housing and informal. Could you just give me some examples of areas in Bedworth which come under formal and areas which come under informal, so I can just differentiate between the two? And also, could you just explain what the data actually represents? Is it your internal satisfaction levels when monitoring that, or because the data hasn't really been explained very well? in that. I'd like to make a few points following on from what Councillor Brown said about the satisfaction responses, which is on page 15 of the report. When we had this report in front of us this time last year, I made the point then that the satisfaction responses are simply too low. And I asked your predecessor, sorry, I don't recall his name, if councillors should be given more involvement in the distribution of those satisfaction response forms. I just wondered if you agreed that councillors should have some involvement in the distribution of those forms. Another point I'd like to make on this matter, and it's more of a question, is it true that if the council does not receive a satisfaction response form back from a local resident, then the council works on the assumption that that resident must be satisfied with the level of service they're receiving from Glendale? Can I just have that confirmation of that, please? Clearly, the returns are just dreadful, and as stated in the report itself, we can't use this data because it's just so insignificant. I mean, October we didn't have any responses, September 2, December 4. Actually, what are we doing to we now live in the 21st century. Tonight we're doing a meeting over Microsoft Teams. Isn't it about time that we get some of these response forms online for people to complete? Just seeing if I've got anything else. No, that's it. Thank you.
David, Councillor Evans raised a lot of questions and points. So I hope that you were noting them down because I don't want any of them to be missed. David?
Thank you, Chair. I will try to take them in order, if that's okay. The first point he raised was with reference to the tree on Coventry Road. I believe he's referring to the one on Church Walk. I would point out that Glendale no longer hold the contract for tree maintenance. That's actually undertaken by another contractor now, Newman Landscapes. And at the time that the tree came down, it caused significant structural damage to the wall on the cemetery as well. And it occurred at the same time as we were in the early stages of COVID-19. So whilst they had removed a large proportion of the tree, there has been a delay in removing the remainder and then arranging for the repair to the wall itself and the replacement of the fencing, which I believe has now taken place. Item 2, with respect to litter, yes, it is included in the grounds maintenance contract, that the contract is required to pick up litter that's on the grassed areas prior to commencing grass cutting operations. Item 3, with reference to the shrub bed removals works, my understanding is that those works were programmed to take place over the winter period. Now I know that Councillor Evans has had a number of conversations with my colleagues about the timing of those operations, and indeed going forward we would look at that again. But I understand that the original period was during the winter period. Item 4, which was the relating to grass cuttings on site. Obviously, when grass is long, it does generate additional grass clippings. The contract requires a contractor to ensure that grass arisings are removed from footway areas. Obviously, for reasons of highway safety, they're not permitted to enter onto the actual carriageway itself. And clearly, with a new contract having a different regime for grass cutting operations, we would anticipate that would remove the need for significant arisings to be produced, notwithstanding the current position we find ourselves in. With reference to the microsite, there have been some teething troubles with the microsite. That is obviously it's a product that is managed by Glendale themselves. I understand that it is now available for the public to access and use. And we impress upon them the need for them to keep that up to date so that both members and members of the public can see when operations are due. Item 6 relating to inquiries. I know that our existing CRM system, as it's being modified so that inquiries can be made through it, will allow members of the public who have grounds maintenance related queries, they will come in through our existing CRM system, and where it is appropriate, they'll be triaged and sent directly for the contractor to answer. Item 7 relating to the rectification notices, I believe, during October 19. Obviously, a significant number of those, I suspect, will relate to the cut and remove operations. That's where they would normally cut and remove grass on informal sites. There was a significant problem with our contractor getting that work done last year, and they were rectified accordingly to that. And that accounts for the significant number because that is when that particular operation is scheduled. Question 8. You refer to some examples of differences between formal and informal sites. Clearly, the Miners Welfare Park actually is an example of where you have elements of both, depending on which end of the site you happen to be in at the time, depending on whether you're accessing it from the Rye Peace Ringway or you're coming from Black Horse Road. But to give you an alternative example, Bailey Park is a similar one. Bailey Park has areas that are quite formal, particularly as you come off Marston Lane, whereas Bedworth Sloughs, for example, would be classed as more of an informal site, and they have, because of the nature of those sites, they have different types of maintenance undertaken on them. I can provide examples if the member wishes outside of this meeting, if you wish to see some more examples of that. Question 9 relating to customer satisfaction ratings. It has been clear to us for some time, and we've reported on this previously, that the numbers of returns that we get are not statistically significant, and that as part of that, we are looking to develop some new arrangements with our own audit team so that we can make it more relevant going forwards. Item 10. I'm just trying to read what my note said on that. Sorry, would you be able to remind me what item 10 was, please?
Yes, sorry, I haven't raised my hand, but yeah, okay. So my 10th question was regarding the council's policy. Is it true that if you issue a satisfaction response form to a local resident, if they don't respond to that form, does the council work on the assumption that the said resident is satisfied with the service they're receiving from Glendale? I just wondered if you could confirm the policy on that.
The current arrangements at present, as you say, we send out approximately 100. They're chosen at random based off the electoral register and sent out. And yes, if there's no response received from the residents, then it is assumed that they're satisfied with the service that they've received at that time. That is one of the reasons why we're looking to review that system.
Thank you, David. I've had 3 other councillors raise their hands in this order, so I'll take them in this order. That's Councillor Kondaka, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Hancox. So I'll take Councillor Kondaka first.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be brief. Firstly, can we wish Dave's predecessor, Paul, a happy retirement? Thank him for all his help over the years. A couple of things have happened during the COVID instance. The big one was all the litter we had when we had the nice weather and people started to go out. I know that there's lots of issues with residents just keep piling more and more litter up when the bins are full. But there was an issue about had the bins been emptied before the weekend. And I know this is a national problem, but I'd just like a few responses on the things that were suggested would sort that out to some extent, particularly the signage telling people not to add to a bin that was already full. Glendale Live, I share Councillor Evans' concerns. A lot of people don't know about it, and a lot of the information on there is out of date. And when we had the issues with the bins, it was the first place I went to look and see what was on there. There's also a mention of water risk a while ago that staff are going to be trained with, so they could do Glendale stuff close to the various things like Changebrook, etc. So I wanted to check that had been done. And my final point from one of the residents, on Coronation Walk, it gets mowed inconsistently. And the last mow, they took a lot more of the grass back and actually mowed over a whole area that's full of the things that become butterflies, caterpillars. There's a lot of annoyance that actually they didn't mow to the consistent line, and the bit by the brook that is developing a whole host of beautiful butterflies just got mowed that once. So it'd be really useful if they either mowed an area or didn't mow it, but to actually let all the wildlife grow, and then the next time you do a cut that's a couple foot across is most annoying. So thank you for those points. Thank you.
All right, David, I'll bring you in to answer Councillor Condacor's queries.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, particularly with reference to the issues around litter, we, like large parts of the rest of the country, have experienced, particularly with the recent hot weather that we have had. We had issues particularly over that weekend. We have been in regular contact with our grounds maintenance contractor to clarify areas where we feel that litter collection may have fallen below what was considered acceptable. But I think in large measure there was on that particular weekend, it was quite overwhelming. Our response to that thus far is obviously we have been speaking to our contractor concerning that, and they have amended their schedules accordingly. We've also taken up an offer from our waste management team to assist where necessary on our 2 destination park facilities, and we've increased our weekend working amongst our own team to help assist with that. Obviously, consequently, we've seen a slight change in the weather at the moment, and that has also we've already seen a decrease in the number of people who are currently out using the parks as a result of that. With regards to the grass cutting on that site, I'll take your point now and I'll take that back to the contractor and ask them to make sure that the grass cutting is amended accordingly. And water safety, I'm not sure whether you're referring to work that we were doing with the grounds maintenance contractor, or you were referring to work that we're doing with local community groups on that one, Keith.
It's just a matter, in the past we've always been told we couldn't have anything done by the brooks because no one had been on water safety courses. So I wanted to check that that wasn't still an issue around, because we've obviously got quite a few brooks going across Wellington and obviously other patches as well. It was always used as an excuse, and everyone blamed Glendale for everything, and I understand things like the river aren't in Glendale's responsibility anyway.
Yes, there are areas obviously where it's classed as main river. Now there's differing responsibilities there depending on whether we're the riparian owners. And working in water courses is something that does require the risks to be managed, and it's often difficult to make distinctions between different types of water course because different people have different interpretations of that. So we do take the view that we will treat them broadly the same, you know, whether it's the river anchor or whether it's the Change Brook. So I know that there was some work that one of my colleagues was doing with a local community group in your ward, I believe, and we were trying to make arrangements so that they were either suitably supervised or they'd had training before they undertook that work.
Okay, is that it, David? David?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, David. Just a few points of housekeeping. I've noticed that Councillor Guthridge has been raising his hand but has been unable to do so using the feature. I just saw that on the webcam. Councillor Condark has put down his hand. I was going to ask if he wanted to come in a second time or whether he just neglected to put it back down after I'd called him. But I'm going to assume the latter. So I'll bring in Councillor Wilson next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of points. The first one is on page 16 with the summary of rectifications and defaults. It just says number of rectifications. It doesn't say whether any defaults were issued. So am I just assuming that there were no defaults at all issued during the period August 19 to February 20? However, if there were, it would be interesting to know how many were issued and how much we recovered from Glendale. And then going back onto the customer satisfaction rating, that concerns me quite greatly that we still are using a nil return as a positive reflection of our service. To me, that isn't an indication of satisfaction, that's an indication of apathy. And no more so is that shown than when you look at actually the October figures where we had 0 returns, but we've reported 100% satisfaction level. But 0 returns doesn't tell me we had 100% satisfaction. It just tells me that 100% couldn't be bothered to return the survey. It doesn't tell me they actually liked the work which was done. And then that leads on to the false positive of Glendale and therefore ourselves as the contracting party, patting ourselves and Glendale patting themselves on the back when they may not necessarily justify that work. Now, I know a lot of them do work hard, and some of them have been kicked by the press, and some of them have been kicked by, this is figuratively, kicked by residents and had them mouthing off at them, which isn't appropriate, but we have to reflect accurately the satisfaction levels which are coming back. So I think we need to end this practice. It's out of date and it's statistically wrong to keep doing that. So I would move, Chair, a formal recommendation to Cabinet for the portfolio holder to cease the practice of treating a nil return as a positive satisfaction or as a plus in the satisfaction stakes, because that is not what it is telling us. It just tells us they can't be bothered to return the form. It doesn't tell us that they were actually happy with the works or unhappy with the works which were done. So it's giving us a false positive. So I would move that recommendation. If you were in any other walk of life to say, I don't know, you assume that because you haven't taken a sugar reading, you aren't diabetic, you wouldn't, that's not a true reading. You need to take the actual reading, tell you whether you will have a high blood sugar level and you are or are not potentially diabetic. That wouldn't happen in any other walk of life apart from this. So I think that's wrong. And in my job, I wouldn't treat a nil return as satisfactory. I would only treat bona fide actual returns in my hand as a return and count those statistically.
Does
So
that receive a seconder?
Seconded, Kyle Evans.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. That's all I had to say.
Yeah, I did have a couple more speakers, so I'd like to vote on that now, then bring in the speakers, if that is permissible. Hello? Philip, that is constitutionally permissible, isn't it?
I don't think it is.
Who said that?
I said that, John Beaumont. There are other speakers indicated, and I would presume
Did you
that
indicate,
the proposal
Councillor
that's being
Beaumont?
made is going to be followed up with some debate.
No, did anybody else indicate other than Councillors Hancock and Gutteridge? I've got a third person raising their hand. I am just seeing who this is now. And a fourth. Okay, so we've got Councillor Kandaka and Councillor Beaumont. So I'll take Councillor Hancock's, Councillor Gutteridge, Councillor Kandaka, and Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Hancock's.
Thank you, Chair. Are we speaking to the report or to the thing that's just been put forward?
To the report for now, but we will be voting on that at the end of this session.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I first of all join Councillor Condacor in the recognition of the service of Paul Daly? He's been a long and loyal employee of the Borough Council and has done much work for us in the borough. So certainly personally, and I'm sure the rest of the committee would want to pass on those thanks and best wishes to him. Secondly, Chair, and it's done in the best of interest, if I can try and help Councillor Evans to increase his knowledge of Bedworth, which is sometimes pretty lacking. The tree that he referred to in Church Walk, Bedworth, was removed last week, the roots and that. And I have to say, considering the current situation we're in, actually thank people for the work that was done along there. That tree caused, when it came down in that storm, caused a lot of damage to those years and years old railings and the old wall to the cemetery. And so it took some while to do, because it's in a part of the area of conservation. So the wall can't just be rebuilt in a modern way. It has to be done in the original manner it was done. And I'm pleased to say that wall has been rebuilt, the railings are on, and the tree has gone. But on a more positive note, because it's easy to be critical over things, it's a really good example of how this Borough Council has worked together with the County Council. I've been asking the county for a long time now to put us a new path up Church Walk, and they did it. I think it was around about Easter time, and they've done a really good job of it, and I have thanked the leader of the County Council for that work. And we've also complemented it by some new benches and new litter bins along there, and it's really improved what is a major pedestrian route into the town centre. So, you know, it's positive stuff when people work together. Sometimes we get on quietly with it and you know, get the work done. But Chair, in regards to the item under discussion as well, yes, it's easy to make the comments and be critical, and a lot of the things that have been brought up here have been ward-based issues, and to be honest, Chair, I think they could be dealt with in other ways rather than on here. But there are things that we can improve on, and particularly coming out of the situation we're in, we want people to enjoy our town centres. We want to try and make them vibrant again. And because it's not, albeit it being my ward, but the town centre is somewhere where everybody comes into. And things like the water feature in front of the arms houses, I think Councillor Evans is sitting in it actually. So it's, you know, we should have that up and running. I know I've asked for it, but I have to be honest, if it was good enough to get it working for the visit of Prince Charles, it should be good enough for the people of Bedworth to enjoy it as well. So it's just one small thing, but I think, you know, the visual aspect of our town centres is an improvement that it could be said. I think for a long time we have had the concerns about the system that the contractors use for getting satisfaction or non-satisfaction returns back, and yes, I think it needs looking at. We've mentioned it in the past, and you know, it's something that again we can work to. So, Chair, I'll just finish off just by repeating that. I think, considering the current situation we're in, and have been in for a while, yes, some areas have not been tended as well as they could do, but I think, from my point of view, I've been a little bit lenient, but I think, you know, after a period of time, we have to start looking at how that contract is made good. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Councillor Hancock. So I would argue that ward matters are of public scrutiny interest, especially at this time where, due to social distancing and switching our email server over to a different provider, it's been more difficult to stay in regular contact with officers. So I think it's fair to raise those kinds of issues. We've got Councillor Gutteridge next.
Thank you, Chair. I would like also to wish Paul Daly the best of retirement. He's helped me no end over the last few years, and I hope he has a very happy and long retirement. I'd like to ask really about the Glendale local. I've had quite a few complaints about the grass cutting in the Whitestone ward, and when you go in, you put the postcode in, and up comes the area, and it's got TBC, to be confirmed. I have asked the officer about it, and he said it'll come better. But at the moment, we are TBC, to be confirmed. Going back to the customer satisfaction rating, I think it's gone past its sell-by date. I think, as Mr. Truslove said, the audit team are going to look at it. I just hope that they get on with it and we see it within the next few months. Thank you.
Okay, that's it, Councillor Gutteridge. In that case, I'll bring in Councillor Kandaka.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Councillor Beaumont that we should actually discuss things when we have a motion put forwards. I'm broadly agreeing with the motion that the rating system is past its best before date. And if we're having a content management system directing customer feedback and requests from our servers onto Glendale servers, surely the question to ask is, when someone goes on the Neaton and Bedford Borough website, do you want to make a service request to Glendale? Do you want to make a complaint about Glendale? And then the system automatically will log how many complaints there were or how many service requests are. Because there is a difference. Yeah, sometimes people contact us because there's something that needs doing, trees falling down, or which isn't actually a complaint. Whereas other times it's something that hasn't been done or should be done. So I think if we work with our content management system, we could automatically record how much was actually complaints. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kandaka. I've got Councillor Beaumont, and that's it, to my knowledge. Councillor Beaumont?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think having heard Councillor Condicor, I think he's just offered the solution to the problem, and it's for the officers to go off and apply themselves to getting it working, because I do think, I totally agree that this system is out of date. I mean, 6 months goes by, you issue 600 cards and you get 50 odd back. That is not a good result, but it's a result that relies on 600 people taking a card and doing something with it. Now, you, like I, Chairman, have delivered leaflets and we know what happens to them. 2 or 3 seconds and they're in a bin. So I think it is extremely difficult to make that system work. You want something where someone has an issue, they approach the council through the reporting system, which I hope works, because I've been promising this for Bulkington for at least 12 months now, that it's reactive and it's intelligent. So if we can put that together, we'll have cracked this one. And I suspect you're pushing at an open door, because no one wants to hear these sort of complaints about lack of real information year after year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beaumont. I've had Councillor Evans, and that will be the last speaker I'll be taking. Councillor Evans?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. So I just wanted to come back to one thing that Dave Truslove answered to one of my original questions. I wasn't actually referring to the Glendale Live microsite. I was actually referring to the CRM microsite that I think is actually mentioned in the report. I think on page 14 at the very top. It says this is due to go live shortly. Well, you know, could we have a specific time frame? And is it possible just to brief us as to what that website will do? I.e., will residents be able to you know, select you know, a street from an interactive map and report it that way, or you know, will they have to write specific details in a form? Or
Councillor.
yes, yes.
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a moment.
I'll just repeat that. So I was just asking if the head of the Parks Department could possibly brief us as to what that website is going to look like. Is it going to be an interactive map similar to fixmystreet.com, or are residents going to have to fill out a form? Just wondered. And I also think that, you know, Councillor Hancock's raises a legitimate point about the water feature in All Saints Square. Would we possibly be able to have some sort of briefing report to look at the feasibility of having that switched back on, particularly in the summer? Because I think that would really help, especially with the whole Transforming Bedworth initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. David, could you come back and arrange this?
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the point about the CRM. Obviously, the Glendale microsite allows members of the public and members to go on and using a postcode or a road name, they should be able to see when maintenance operations are due in their area.
BBC.
And I know that up until recently it has been reading TBC because I've been looking at it myself. And certainly that in some respects is a reflection of where we have been recently with regards to COVID-19 and the triage nature of the grounds maintenance. The forms for making inquiries actually will be coming through our existing CRM. So it will be it's the existing inquiry system that the council has. So the inquiries will be coming through there. What it will be doing is sorting those inquiries where they come in, where they are related to grounds maintenance matters, such as, for example, where an operation has occurred but the work has not been completed. Those will be directed to the contractor to respond to directly. Obviously, if it's a request for service that falls outside of the grounds maintenance contract, then that would come through to the parks team to address. And finally, just going back to the references to the water feature in the almshouses, I shall be making inquiries about that as soon as I'm able.
Thank you very much, David. We did have a motion raised by Councillor Wilson, which was seconded by Councillor Evans. I'd like Councillor Wilson to read it out verbatim so that we know precisely what we'll be voting on, and also, if possible, to post it in the chat just for the sake of unambiguity. And I'll, of course, give Councillor Wilson a moment to plan that out.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just type something in, but can I also have an answer to my question about the default notices, which I mentioned the first time around?
Yes, please. David?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Wilson. There were no default notices issued during that period.
I'm just waiting for the wording and then we'll proceed.
Yeah, I'm just doing that now, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
While he's doing that, Chair, can we just ask how we're going to vote?
We will vote with raised hands, and I will count which are for the ayes and which are for the nays.
I don't think you can do that, Chair, because
roll
you
call.
won't be able to see
Okay.
all the members. What we will be doing, I have effectively it's a recorded voters list of all the members who are on the panel. I will call out their names for and against and abstain, and the members can then orally speak.
That's for precedent that we set at planning, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we'll accept that then.
I've sent that through now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm just going to have a read of that myself. I'll read it out. Recommendation to Cabinet that Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council cease to recognise a nil return on a grounds maintenance satisfaction survey as a positive response. So we'll begin voting on that matter. Philip, would you be able to start on that?
Yes, Chair, I'm all set to go. So, members, if they haven't got sight of it, it's just been read out to you. So,
debated that then, Chair. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Hancock?
Have we already debated that? I asked the question earlier whether we were speaking to the report or to this. You said to the report.
Well, if you'd like to speak on that, then I will accept that in the interest of scrutiny. Do we have any other hands raised on this matter? I see a hand raised from Councillor Hocking and Councillor Beaumont.
Which one are you calling, Chair?
Oh, I'm calling Councillor Hancock as his hand was raised first.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Hancock, do you have any more to say? If not, I'll move on to Councillor Hocking. I'll move on to Councillor Hocking.
Chair, I've lowered my hand now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Fair enough. That makes our job easier. Councillor Beaumont.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The problem I have with the proposition is that if you don't count no return as satisfaction, what are you going to count it as? Because if you get no returns at all, as happened in one of the occasions that's listed in this report, what do you report that as? I just don't see how changing it from an assumption of satisfaction to an assumption presumably of dissatisfaction or something like that. I just don't see how it produces a logical report anymore.
Well, surely there would be no assumptions whatsoever.
The results you get.
If there's no results, then we can't make any assumption either way, and we just have to count it as non-applicable. That's the way most organisations use their data, or lack thereof. I've got some raised hands. I'm just going to check who that is. And my phone's froze up, so bear with me a second. I've got Councillors Pomfret, Wilson and Hancock's. Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's a lot of assumptions about why people do things when they're asked for their opinion. I mean, I get asked for my opinion, must be at least 10 times a week. You know, this is email, this text, you know, YN. And so most of them I ignore. It's not because I'm apathetic, it's because, you know, I've got better things to do, really. And I think that's probably the case with many people who get these cards. We can't assume that they are dissatisfied or anything else, but that if they had an extreme satisfaction or extreme problem, I'm sure they'd let us know. We've been told that other organisations wouldn't accept this as satisfaction. Well, I don't know which organisations people are familiar with, but I'm thinking of two private sector organisations. One I have little knowledge of, my bank. They assume that if you're not complaining, that you're okay with them. And I know that the people who deal with my car, they actually do think that if you don't reply, that you are satisfied. So I don't think we can make sweeping assumptions My view on whether this recommendation should go forward to Cabinet is that, as far as I know, this is already being dealt with.
All due respect, if we're not making sweeping assumptions, then we shouldn't assume that people are automatically happy if they're not responding.
I'm only stating my opinion, Chair. I'm sure you don't agree with me.
At least you know I don't agree.
Just a minute. Thank you, Chair. It was stated that other organisations don't make these assumptions. Well, I'm just telling you that from my personal knowledge, some do. That's all. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but it's not the case that in other organisations this assumption isn't made. I was going to also add that basically this issue, as far as I'm concerned, is being dealt with. I think another member mentioned this earlier on. And the officer who introduced the report also said this is being dealt with. And really, I don't feel inclined to issue the same recommendation or whatever you want to call it twice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pomfret. I've got Councillors Wilson and Councillors Hancock's left. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In response to about what you do if no one returns it, as you quite rightly said, Chair, the response would be not applicable. That's what happens when you have no response, usually, that it is not applicable. And as to working out the satisfaction results, if you have 50% of, if you have 6 out of 12 respond, 6 saying they're happy and 6 saying they're not, then it's a 50% satisfaction. It's not hard mathematically to work out based on the number of responses that you have. And I have to say, I completely disagree with Councillor Pomfret's assertion that we shouldn't actually do anything if it's already been looked at Cabinet. We don't know that. The Cabinet member isn't here to answer for that. And also, this is scrutiny. It's our job to make these recommendations. If they happen to coincide with what the portfolio holder is thinking, so much the better. If they don't, then at least he knows what we are thinking, and then he has to provide a response as to why he disagrees with what scrutiny is thinking. And that's the whole setup of an executive and scrutiny arrangement system. So ducking the issue and not answering the question isn't good enough. That's what we're here for, is scrutiny, to hold the Cabinet and the process to account. And that's what this recommendation does. I'm not happy with it, therefore I've moved the recommendation. If people want to just be apathetic and either say no or vote against it, fine. But as a local member and as a councillor, I'm not happy with the process as it is. Therefore, I see it as my duty to make the recommendation to Cabinet, and Cabinet then have their responsibility to deal with it as they wish. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will take Councillor Hancock's and then we shall move to the vote. Councillor Hancock's.
Chair, if that's the case, I perhaps won't speak because I've seen Councillor Tandy has had her hand up for some time. You might not be able to see it. I don't know, but I can see it on my screen. But in relation to this, we're getting ourselves tied down with this in the bigger scheme of things, really. And I agree partly with Councillor Pomfret and partly with Councillor Wilson. But I actually think, and when this vote is taken, I would move something else, and that all of the comments that are made at this scrutiny panel today are referred to the portfolio holder and the Cabinet for consideration. And I think that encompasses anybody with any concerns about the returns system, you know, for that. Because, you know, a lot of things work on that basis, whether we like it or not. They work on the basis that if you don't complain, you're happy. Now, that might be right or it might be wrong, but that's how it works. And I think it's enough that the Cabinet member and the Cabinet are well aware of our comments in this. I don't think it needs an individual motion, but it's been moved and seconded, and I know you're going to take it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of public scrutiny, I will accept Councillor Tandy's contribution. Councillor Tandy.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, you've just muted yourself, Councillor Tandy. You're unmuted. You're muted.
That's perfect. Keep it that way.
Okay, it's back on. That kept going on and off. I fully understand the discussions that have been held, and I do fully understand the concerns about people who don't send their responses back, whether they are wishing to complain or whether they aren't. But I think just to go forward and say Cabinet should consider this, I would move an amendment, and the amendment would say that Cabinet and possibly the Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider a better way forward of reporting when issues are as to whether or not people are satisfied or otherwise. Because it's no good just saying we can't do it. If it can't be done and no one's happy with it, we need to have a new system to do it properly. And that is the reason for my amendment.
Does that receive a seconder?
Yes,
I'll second that.
Oh, who seconded that?
Councillor Hocking.
Thank you, Councillor Hocking. I believe the procedure is to take the... Oh, I've got another raised hand. I'm just going to see who that is. Councillor Evans. Please, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you'll be allowing people to speak to the amendment.
Yes.
Yes.
We are now speaking on the amendment.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll be voting against Councillor Tandy's amendment because I believe her proposal, to put it simply, just sweeps the issue under the carpet. I get what you're saying, but if the council can't do it for whatever reason, and why they wouldn't be able to do it, I don't know. But if they can't, then Cabinet won't approve it. Simple as. So I think that Councillor Wilson's original recommendation was the best way to take this issue forward and actually get a result for the people of the borough. So I'll be voting against Councillor Tandy's amendment because I believe that she's trying to sweep the issue under the carpet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Do we have any more speakers on the amendment? If that's a no, oh, I've got one raised hand. That is from Councillor Sargent. Councillor Sargent.
All right, thanks, Chair. So is the amendment in addition to Councillor Wilson's original proposal? So recommendation to the Cabinet to cease and recognise nil return on grounds maintenance satisfaction survey as positive response, and then what Councillor Tandy said, or is it one or the other?
It's an to my understanding, it's an amendment to the original motion as raised by Councillor Wilson. Although I would like Philip Richardson's legal advice on to whether it's acceptable as an amendment, because it seemed transformative to me. But I'm not the legal voice on that. I did see Councillor Wilson raise his hand, so I'll bring in Councillor Wilson in case.
Can I just say then, if we're going to vote on with the amendment, can we have the whole lot written down on the chat so we can actually...
I was about to ask for that. That is standard if anybody is raising an amendment. The sooner you can write it in after raising it, the better, and I will read that out for the sake of clarity. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I feel that the proposed amendment negates the original motion, because the original motion was quite clear in that we are asking Cabinet to cease the practice of counting a nil return as a positive indication of satisfaction with our services. Just saying that we ask you to consider what you do with the system, that doesn't tell Cabinet either way how we feel about the present situation. Cabinet could, if we approve the original motion, then Cabinet will know our view one way or the other. If the Cabinet agree or not, that's a different issue. Then they have to reply to us as an OSP and say why they don't agree. But at least the original motion is clear. It has an action, which is to recommend that we cease the current practice, because we don't believe it is statistically significant and gives true reflection on our current performance. So I would vote against the amendment, because to be honest, Chair, I think it's wishy-washy. It doesn't do anything about the situation. At least the original motion does do that.
Well, Councillor Wilson, I did read it as a potential negation, so I would like Councillor Tandy to write down the full amendment, and then I'd like Philip Richardson to rule on whether it is an acceptable amendment or not.
If someone will tell Councillor Tandy how I actually write on that page, then I'm quite prepared to write it down. Unfortunately, it's not allowing me to.
Chair, perhaps it would help if Councillor Tandy dictated it, and then perhaps Kelly, I think, who's in the background there, could type it into the chat.
Absolutely, that's an acceptable alternative.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Oh, yeah, sorry. Wendy has just typed it into the chat. I've just had added it into the chat.
Yeah.
All right, I'll read it out and ask if Councillor Tandy is happy with that, and that reflects what she said. Cabinet and OSB consider a better way of reporting as to whether people are satisfied. Amendment JT. Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Tandy?
Not wholly, no, because I said to find that we need to find a better way of getting people to respond as well, without having to assume that non-returners are satisfied with the service. That is what I'm talking about.
Understood. Could we amend that, Kelly, to more closely recommend what? More closely follow what Councillor Tandy recommended?
Yes, Chair. If you just give me a minute or two.
I've had Councillor Hancock's and Councillor not Shepherd. It's not Councillor Shepherd, is it? Oh, Councillor Sargent. I've had both of those raise their hands in that order. Is this relevant to what we're speaking about, Councillor Hancock's?
I'll let you decide as chair.
All right, fair enough.
Chair, people have made a bit of an issue about this being absolutely clear, written down as an amendment, like we do at a full council meeting. That should be done. But this has come without, without prior stuff. Can I just remind you, I said at the start of the meeting, I don't have access to chat.
Which is exactly why I will read it from the chat once it is clear.
Well, then I don't see why you were making such a point about having it down on chat, so that we were absolutely clear. I've got the drift of it. Please don't misunderstand me. I've got the drift of it, but you were making a strong point that it should be done on chat.
I'd like to answer that, Councillor Hancock. That is just so that we have it on a form of public record that we can refer back to at a later date if anybody has any issues. I'm more than happy for an officer to read it out instead of me if I'm considered an unreliable narrator in any respect.
No, I didn't suggest that, Chair, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
That's fine. I accept that. And I had Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I just want to say if I mean, Councillor Wilson is right. That we need to to stop the positive response being a response coming. That if people don't respond, that's a positive response. But at the same time, we need some way of monitoring that. We can't just sort of remove one system and then go, well, okay, what we're going to do. And I think that's what Councillor Tandy is trying to do. She's trying to get let's have a look at another system rather than just saying, well, we've got nothing. So, it's perfectly obvious to me if we take one system away, then we've got to replace it with something.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent. Wendy, do we have that updated amendment as per Councillor Tandy's liking?
Chair, I think you'll see that Kelly's just posted an updated amendment.
All right, I will refer to that now. The wording of which, and I'm just getting it up on the screen, is Cabinet and OSP provide a better way of the public reporting their dissatisfaction or satisfaction to the council. And that is how you wanted it, isn't it, Councillor Tandy?
That's more or less how I want it, but my chat, I can't read it because my chat isn't working at all.
That is okay. Any issues like that, please bring them up and we'll do our best to help. Philip Richardson, Philip,
Yes, Chair.
can I have your ruling on whether that is an acceptable amendment or whether it negates the original amendment?
Well, Chair, it's not me that makes that ruling, it's you as Chair. That's the first thing. The second thing, it doesn't negate it in the sense that it is not putting a not in front of it. It's obviously coming up with a different conclusion, different result, but it doesn't necessarily count as a negation, and therefore it would be an acceptable amendment. What Councillor Tandy has effectively done, as far as I can see, looking at it, is she's taken the first three words of Councillor Wilson's recommendation and then deleted the rest of it and inserted, well, with a reference to Cabinet, the and OSP provide a better way of the public reporting their dissatisfaction, satisfaction, etc. So it's one for you, but as an amendment, it looks to be okay.
Well, thank you for your advice, Philip. I would say that because it only includes the first three words, it's completely different in the spirit to the original proposal, so I wouldn't accept that as an amendment, and that's my ruling as chair. So I'd like to move to the vote on Councillor Wilson's recommendation.
Certainly, Chair. So it's as originally moved by Councillor Wilson. That if I read it out, Chair, so that particularly Councillor Hancock's and any other member who can't see it on screen, the suggestion is recommendation to Cabinet that MBBC cease to recognise a nil return on a ground maintenance satisfaction survey as a positive response. So if I can go to the vote, Chair, I'm going to ask members to either vote for, against or to abstain. So I'll start with Councillor Beaumont.
I didn't abstain, Chair. So I'll vote against.
Councillor Croft. For. Councillor Hancock's in place of Councillor Doughty.
Against.
Councillor Elliott.
Well, I had some technical issues and missed some of it, so I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Evans.
Kyle Evans, for.
Councillor Glass, I presume isn't here. Oh, is Councillor Glass here?
Councillor Glass, can you hear me?
Oh.
I would presume that is a no, unless we have any evidence to the contrary.
I've no idea, Chair. Okay, so
please continue.
Councillor Gran.
For.
Councillor Guttridge.
For.
Councillor Hocking.
Abstain.
Councillor Kandaka.
I'm not happy with that Councillor Tandy's motion's been ruled out. I think it we should actually vote on both motions, so I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Pomfret.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Tandy.
Against.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
So, what's the score, Philip?
I make that 6 for, 4 against and 3 abstentions, Chair. So the motion is carried. So there's a recommendation to Cabinet.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I would like to move on to the next agenda item number 7, which is cemetery regulations and operations. Do we have an officer giving a presentation on this matter?
Chair, we do. It's Kevin Hollis.
Thank you. I'd like you. We don't have any public contributions on this, do we? I'll take that as a no. Please continue, Kevin, with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This report.
Sorry, Chair. We do have a public statement on this one.
We do. Okay, I'll take that now then. who's giving the public
Yeah,
statement?
I have it, Chair. Do you want the report first? And we normally take the report from the officer first, and then we have public speaking. So normally Kevin would do his presentation first, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Please continue, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides panel members with a draft cemetery regulations framework undertaken by the previous Parks and Countryside manager. It provides a solid foundation for the authority to move forward with in developing an updated policy framework for this service delivery area. In terms of just quickly going through the report, because it is very lengthy, section 4, the last time the regulations were revised was in 2006. The service has continued to evolve with changes around administrative practices, customer expectation, practice, availability of space, and in terms of allowability within the cemetery environments, but not formally agreed. Feel there is a necessity now to look at how we operate and create a revised set of regulations that reflect the current situation and remove any ambiguity for the residents moving forward. Section 4.2 suggests some additional prices and fees to build upon in terms of that's following queries received. Section 5 identifies the areas in the appendix attached to the report. And just to say that these are to give clarity to all aspects of people requesting areas within this area of the service. Chair, with your permission, I'd also like to suggest that panel members consider, now that this document is used as a sort of framework, and that it's now used to go out to consult further with members, funeral directors, the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management and the local guild, to seek their feedback prior to finalising the policy. This would then engage and allow stakeholders to have some feedback on that before then potentially the OSP would then submit this to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome, Kevin. And as you think that's of interest in your role, I'm sure that the panel will discuss this. So I will take speakers on this now. So please raise your hands.
Well, Chair, do you want me to read out the public statement now?
Oh, of course, yes.
Yes, thank you. This is from a Miss Hughes, and she says as follows: I would like to raise the question of payment for applying to renew the lease on grave plots. In 1996, I lost my father and decided that I would like to be buried next to my parents, so I purchased the plot next to them. At the time, Hackett's informed me that the deeds were for 99 years, but recently I have discovered that the deeds were only for 30 years, so this means that the deeds will expire in 2026. Not only that, but to renew them, I will have to pay the full cost of £730. I'm informed that the cost of purchasing deeds goes up every year. No doubt I am now looking at paying over £1,000 to renew the deeds. There is also a possibility that I could live a further 30 years, which would mean I would have to renew yet again. So what would be the overall cost of purchasing this plot? I was born in Bedworth and I have lived here all my life. I pay the full council tax apart from a single person's discount, and I find this payment unfair and unjust. I don't mind paying an administrative fee, but surely not the full cost. All I want is to be laid to rest next to my parents. Could the deeds be worded for 30 years or the life of the purchaser, whichever is the greatest? If it were your son or daughter that wanted to be buried next to you, would you like to think that they might have to pay the full cost for that privilege more than once? Would you please reconsider the policy for payment of the lease period for the exclusive right of burial? And that's signed by Miss Hughes.
Thank you for that, Philip. And that's the only one we've had on this. All right, in that case, I will open up the floor to the members. So please raise your hand. Oh, Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Chair. I fully welcome the report. I would like to ask Kevin some questions. How many burial plots have we got in the borough, Nuneaton and Bedworth, vacant? And my second question is, I applaud you going out to consultation with the funeral directors and various other denominations. But have you thought about going out to the various churches? Because the different dioceses, like the Coventry diocese, have a regulation for of what sort of gravestone you can have in the churchyard, and you need a faculty for this, that, and the other.
Okay, I've got councillors Hancox and Wilson raising their hands, so I'll take them in that order. Councillor Hancox.
Chair, can Kevin come back to me with the answers to my question, please?
Sorry, I could hear him. I think you're muted now, Kevin.
I was muted, Chair, until
I could hear you for a little while. I
question.
didn't realise that you were muted.
Sorry. To be perfectly honest, and to answer Councillor Ross's questions, I don't have the answer to question 1, but I can come back to that and provide you with that information. And in terms of the consultation, I think that there is no reason why we could not consult wider, apart from the groups that I mentioned. I think it's invaluable that we do include the stakeholders in the final drafting of this policy. Thank you, Chair.
Can I come back, Chair? Chair?
Yes, of course, of course.
Thank you, Kevin. I think you've got to go out to consultation with the guild, the Funeral Guild of Directors, because they have got some very good points at the moment. Because unfortunately, I've had to use a funeral director in the last few months for my mother, and I had quite a long chat with the funeral directors, and they would like some consultation with you.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I missed that on the presentation, but I have got that in terms of members, funeral directors, the Institute, and also the local guild as sort of examples of stakeholder for feedback, because I think that would be very valuable for us moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
All right, I have Councillor Hancox next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I hope you'll be patient with me. I've got a number of comments and points, really. Actually, Mrs. Hughes that has submitted some comments? She's kind of, I think that was her name, wasn't it?
That's the name given, yes.
Yeah, she's kind of raised a point that I'd already noted, and it was in regard to, at the moment, there was an option for a 30-year being able to reserve your plot or your grave, and now it's been proposed to a 50. But I'm wondering, and I'll declare an interest in this in as much as I've got one reserved, and I'm probably getting towards using it, but I might run out of the 30 years. So does that then mean that if that, for those people, existing people that have got a reserved 30-year plot, as they are approaching that 30 year, are they going to be expected to pay another fee to make it 50 years, or is it the case that it can just be, is it just going to be extended? I'm happy if that's answered now, because I've got quite a few other things. No, shall I carry on then?
Kevin? You're muted, Kevin.
Sorry, yeah, it's delayed response. I was trying to mute and unmute. Chair, I to be perfectly honest, new to this and to the report, only being new to post, I would prefer to get the answer right and come back to Councillor Hancox after the meeting.
Yeah, I think it is important, Chair, because you know there'll be. I'd only be guessing. I don't know how many people are in that situation, but it would seem unfair if they had to pay another fee. If got no grade.
Well, even one's too many. You're right about that.
Oh, that must be me then. Something else, Chair. I'm sorry, I've got things a bit over the place. So if I can talk about section S, 1 and 2, in regards to memorial benches and trees. I have to say, and David Trusloff will be well aware of, I've had any number of issues in regards to this in relation to Marston Lane Cemetery. And, you know, we no longer, when we construct cemeteries, we no longer create them as a landscaped cemetery like we did many years ago. So if you look at Country Road, Bedworth, I think that's actually got park status, you know, because of the landscape nature of it. But say we've had many problems over relatives wanting to have trees and benches near to where their loved ones are buried or interred, and we've kind of created that problem really, because when we did the extension to Marston Lane, that was when we should have had the policy change, you know, so that everybody was clear about it and done. It's created some problems, and whilst I'm not personally totally committed about this aspect of it, if this goes forward, at least what it will do is provide clarity and consistency.
Yeah.
And it's just going, also, funny enough, comes back to another comment that has just been made. And we need to make sure that all this information, even when these things are agreed or changed, all that information is provided to the undertakers. So that very first instance when families are talking to them, that information is available to them and they understand it. We know it's a difficult time and there's a lot of things for people to take in, but it might prevent some discomfort further down the line. I'm kind of there, Chair, but just two final points, I think. Something that I don't see within the report that I think some consideration should be given to Cabinet, and that's in regards to fees and charges. And I just wonder why, and I don't want people to misunderstand me, but I think it may be something that it could be considered as a single member decision. As I understand it, that's what happens in licensing in regards to taxi fees and things. It's a single member decision. And I'm not saying it would be the right thing to do, but I think it's something that should be considered. And to, as part of it, and that being included into it, basically I would want to kind of agree the recommendations within here, but review it. If it's implemented in 21, review it in January 22 to see what anything we need to tweak with it. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome, Councillor Hancock. I've got Councillor Wilson next.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's good that we're starting to have everything reviewed and brought into one consistent policy, because as I think members have already alluded to, it's a very difficult time in any family dealing with these sorts of circumstances. But I do have a few questions. The first question is about Part S, about memorial benches and trees. This policy only applies to being within the cemetery. Do we have a separate policy about anyone who might wish to erect memorial benches or trees outside of a cemetery, perhaps at a local nature spot or something like that, that's more personal to the family? I know we've got one, as myself and Councillor Gutteridge, we've had a resident die of, unfortunately, of COVID-19 within the Whitestone area. Yeah, and they're looking at wanting to erect something more local because it's where they used to like. So it'll be interesting to know whether we have that. If we don't, I might want to move a recommendation that we ask Cabinet separately to consider that, because I think whilst it's important that we do so with cemeteries, that it would be nice if we could possibly look at giving people the option about that. Going on to page 59 and Part X, I'm extremely pleased to see that for burials under 18, including those of non-viable fetus, so presumably those who have suffered from miscarriages, etc., or stillbirths, that we will not be charging those because for any parent, losing or outliving a child must be one of the most horrific things to ever have to go through. And the fact that we've recognised that, I think, is very much to the council's credit. Going on to page 62, where I do have a slight issue, is on Part 8 about the fees. and it says treble fees apply to non-residents. But there's a very grey area, and I accept that we have to make a ruling, but I am personally uncomfortable about that when they may have a local connection to the borough.
Yeah.
So they may have moved out of the borough or have been born and bred all their life in the borough but gone to a residential care home outside of the borough and want to be buried back in the burial plot that they have actually paid for. So that bit does leave me uncomfortable slightly, Chair. But overall, I'd be interested to see what responses we get from the consultation, because that may be interesting to see what comes back, and we may have some further thoughts about that. But overall, it's a good piece of work. But I would like some clarification about those memorial benches and trees, whether we have a separate policy outside of the cemeteries.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I think that's an excellent point you just raised. I've known of issue when one of my residents' relatives passed away, who was at Cowleys, which is literally just over the border with North Warwickshire, and they got charged for triple fees, despite it being literally over the road from the borough. I did have Councillor Kandaka and Councillor Hancock's, so I'll go with Kandaka first and Hancock's.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. There's a mixture of metric and imperial measures for all these documents, and in one place it says 36 inches without a metric. So, and some things it's metric first, and some things it's imperial first. So, I don't know if there's a consistency there. And on trees, places like Hartsel Hayes have quite often had memorial trees up there. And if we want to add more trees to the borough, I think we should be looking at actually some of our open spaces, particularly where some of the development's going on, and we're actually eventually going to take over the management of spaces across the borough, could actually form a place for people to raise a tree to their mother, father, or whoever, and actually raise some funds for planting trees as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kandaka. I think we should standardise either imperial or metric. I can convert them easily, so it doesn't matter too much to me, but that's for the Borough Council to decide, but one or the other. Councillor Hancock's.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for letting me come back in. It's only to try and be helpful, really. The point that was made about fees for people living in other areas is a really good point. And I can actually remember it. The last time that I sat on this internal scrutiny panel, I can remember us having a conversation at the time, and I was under the understanding, and maybe I'm wrong because it's been a couple of years ago, but it was my understanding that we would allow a discretion for people in those circumstances. So if there was a strong local link, but they'd moved away somewhere else, but were coming back to be with their family, then there was a discretionary element. I may be wrong, or I may be right, and if I'm right, it might have changed. So I don't know. It'd be worth checking. And just in regards to Councillor Wilson's point about benches in other places, I think it's always been the case that we can do that. I know of a number of benches and things that we can do, but it's a really good point, and often they're in places where people want to be remembered by, rather than in a cemetery location. Thank you, Chair.
All right. I just got a private message from somebody whose number isn't registered asking if they could speak. I would prefer it if you use the official channels to let me know. Could whoever wants to speak, please speak up now. I assume that's nobody, and that's an unrelated message. So do we have any more speakers on this item? Are we happy to move on to the next item in that case? If I've got no objections, then we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council monitoring of the borough local plan, as it's worded. Do we have a presentation on this?
Yeah, it's me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
you,
you, Chair.
Catherine. Good to see you.
Thank you. As you're aware, the local plan was adopted in June 2019, and the plan includes a large number of indicators and targets which are required to be monitored for all the policies. Now, normally national monitoring periods are by municipal year, so obviously April to March. Monitoring is undertaken using various methods: site visits, discussions with developers, analysis of planning decisions, and liaison with bodies both internal and external to the council. The current situation with COVID-19 has not actually delayed the monitoring process, and we've been underway since the beginning of April. However, it is normal practice that the results are not usually available until around August time. It is suggested that as this is the first set done against the adopted local plan, that a further report be brought to the panel when it is ready. But I'm happy to discuss or answer any questions about the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I've got one speaker so far. It's Councillor Kandaka. So, do we have any members of the public, first of all, that have asked to speak on this?
No, Chair. No,
Thank
Chair.
you for confirming that. In that case, I will open it up to the panel to discuss. I've got Councillor Kandaka's hand up. So, Councillor Kandaka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Measurement against plan is really important because developers keep saying we aren't building enough houses, etc. But also the plan is driven from a sub-regional thing, this strategic housing market area assessment, if I've got the acronym right. So not only should we see how we're doing against our plan, but actually how Warwick, Stratford, Coventry, etc. are. Because we know that South Warwickshire's had a big housing boom. They've been building 1,000 or 2,000 a year. And I wanted Catherine to sort of explain to us how the delivery targets and this monitoring works at that sub-regional level, so that we don't get hammered, because we've been given a ridiculously high target, in my view, when they shared the target out from Coventry. Obviously, a lot of the wealth has gone down to the Warwick and Stratford-upon-Avon area, and so they're overachieving on their target. So if maybe we could have a bit of feedback on the sort of sub-regional bit and how it fits in with our local. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kandaka. I'm just going to see if we've got any other speakers on this item. It's not showing up for me if we do. Oh, I've got two raised hands now. I've got Councillor Evans. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few things I'd like to say on this. Is it possible for Catherine to give us an update on when the supplementary planning documents are likely to be approved, particularly the concept plan for HSG4 off the Bedworth Woodlands? The other thing I wanted to raise, there's been a few things in the media over recent weeks about the Coventry housing numbers. Now, obviously we know that the Office for National Statistics have come out with this figure for 42,000 additional dwellings for Coventry by 2031. Obviously that figure though doesn't take into consideration university students who are leaving the University of Warwick and Coventry. And I note that the leader of Coventry City Council, Councillor George Duggins, has recently confirmed that Coventry City Council intend to review their local plan in 2021. In addition to that, the Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, as well as regional council leaders, have also agreed the Green Recovery Plan. So in light of those two things, could I ask how will that impact on our housing numbers? Thank you.
Okay, can we have some answers for Councillor Evans' questions, please?
Yeah, well, one of the answers sort of covers what Councillor Kondakor asked as well, in that as well as our own monitoring report, we do feed into a Coventry and Warwickshire housing market area monitoring report as well. The timetable for that is round about the same time, so that also should be ready in August. So that, yes, that can also be brought back to the panel for their scrutiny. The thing about SPDs, they are due to go to the next full council whenever that is held, by whatever means that meeting is held. And as regards housing numbers and the next round of the local plans, almost all the authorities in Warwickshire will be gearing up to review their plans within the next couple of years, and any new numbers and any government guidance will be fed into that process.
Councillor Evans, does that satisfy you?
Could I possibly come back, Chair, with your permission?
Yes, I was inviting you to.
Yeah, because I know Councillor Condacor indicated before me. I don't know if you want to take him first or.
Is this going to be brief?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to raise a separate matter regarding our own review of the borough plan. We agreed as a council around 12 months ago that we would seek to begin the process of the immediate review as soon as possible. We're yet to do that, and that concerns me, considering that other local authorities are in the process of trying to begin their reviews. So in light of that, Chair, I wish to move the following recommendation. I will read it out, but I will then copy and paste it into the comments section.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
This panel resolves to recommend to Council that it adopts the following motion. This Council resolves to request that the portfolio holder for planning and development requests the head of the planning department to commence a review of the borough plan on Thursday the 16th of July 2020 in accordance with regulation 10A of the Town and Country Planning (local planning) England regulations 2012 as amended. I'm just going to put that into the chat thing, but I'd like to formally propose that recommendation, Chair, because I believe that we now need to, get the ball rolling with this. We need to start an immediate review as soon as possible. And the reason, just to give clarity as to why I've given the date Thursday, the 16th of July, that's the day after full council. So if full council wishes to approve the motion, it means that our officers in the planning department can start that process 9 o'clock the next morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Does his motion see a seconder? I see Councillor Kondaka raising his hand. Is that to second the motion? You're muted, Councillor Kondaka.
Yes, Chair. I thought waving was good enough. Yeah. I'm
okay. Well,
and
brilliant.
I wanted, if I may, just to come back on what Catherine Morton said.
Yes, of course. You were next in the queue anyway.
In terms of all the different plans coming back at the same time, these are monitoring. I think we should actually have at the next meeting that data is available from all the councils, not just the latest housing data, but the latest population projections as well. Because I know from Cabinet at County today, they're talking potentially about 100,000 job losses in Coventry and Warwickshire.
Yeah.
So I think we are going to take a big economic hit from COVID, which will then have a population hit, particularly with how much of Coventry is dependent upon students and incoming migrant workers. So we really do need this review. So I'm very happy to second Carl's proposal. But also I think at the next meeting, we should get a lot more data from not just our housing figures, but Stratford and places like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kondaka. Can we have that information at the next meeting, Catherine?
You can have whatever the latest published population for projections are for all the district authorities, which are in the public domain now. What you can't have is taking any impact on anything that's happening at the moment, because it's not local authorities that make up those figures. It's either the Office for National Statistics or the government or some other body. but what you can have whatever's already in the public domain. Yes.
Well, that's good. And anything that comes out between now and then, we will also have, won't we? And also the information that's already out there, not all the members may have seen that as of yet. So I think it's of interest for the next meeting. I have got Councillor Wilson next. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for dropping out of the meeting slightly. Microsoft decided to do an update exactly at the moment I didn't want it to. So, other operating systems are available. I think it's critical that we actually get this proper review underway of the borough plan. We are going through an unprecedented time at the moment in everyone's lives and everyone's particular employment, and we're going to see many significant changes both in the economy and people's patterns of behaviour, and we need to start the work on that as soon as possible. We already knew that some of the data was extremely out of date in comparison. The inspector said that there was more up-to-date information, if I remember rightly, from his report, but he had to take it from the date of submission rather than that. And it seems rather unfair that we're seeing, or I've certainly seen, articles from councillors in Coventry, Labour councillors as they happen to be, calling for their land to be returned to Greenbelt because they don't want developments on their particular land. But we as an authority here in Nuneaton and Bedworth have had to de-Greenbelt our land to accommodate Coventry's, in my view, overinflated population statistics. I find that rather galling, to be honest, because my residents in particular, and Councillor Gutteridge, have deliberately seen our particular pieces of land added because we have agreed to take Coventry's overspill, and Bulkington as well, I might add. So we need to get on with this ASAP, because whilst our areas, in all probability, we won't be able to save for future generations because we're too far down the line, we may be able to stop other areas having to be sacrificed in the not too distant future because of erroneous data from our counterparts and neighbours in Coventry. And if I also remember rightly, I saw something about the Labour leader in Coventry saying that there was a danger that if they reviewed their borough plan, or sorry, their local plan, the only effect it would have wouldn't be actually for Coventry, but it would see their neighbouring authorities, i.e. us, losing some allocations that we've had to take for Coventry. So I'm sorry, but you've asked us to take them. The best you can do is, if you no longer need them, release them back to us, because we've done that because you told us you needed them. Although I personally disagreed with signing that memorandum of understanding. So I will wholeheartedly support that recommendation. We haven't, unfortunately, seen the local plan committee be as active as certain members of us would have liked. We fought the battle to get the council to agree to that after about 3 or 4 attempts of my moving that at full council. We finally got that agreed to, but it hasn't moved as swiftly as both I and other residents of this borough would like. So I would like to see that happen ASAP, and will endorse the recommendation. But if it hasn't already been said, on a side note, Chair, as this is probably Catherine's last meeting before she gets internal OSP meeting, that is. From internal OSP, I would like to thank Catherine for her work with the Scrutiny Committee, because she gets her freedom at the end of the month. And we haven't always seen eye to eye on internal or its predecessors overview and scrutiny, but she's always played a straight bat with us whether or not we like the answers. So I'd like to also see that minuted in the overview and scrutiny minutes, please, Chair.
Yes, I would minute that as well. And if it hasn't been already, thanks to Paul Daly as well. But no, thank you very much, Catherine, for all you've done for us over the years. I had Councillor Evans want to come back in. Councillor Evans.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I it's my own fault. I clicked mute by accident, but I didn't take the opportunity to actually explain why I want to move the recommendation I did. So with your permission, I'm asking if I can do so now. As Councillor Wilson has already alluded to, there's been numerous reports from Labour councillors in Coventry about their housing numbers. It's clear that the figures being used in Coventry are over inflated. Now, at the end of the day, I'm willing to do whatever I can to get our own housing numbers reduced, so that we can look towards removing sites in the borough plan such as HSG4. That was a promise that I made to my constituents back in 2018, and I want to fulfil on that promise by moving this recommendation tonight, because we have to get it started as soon as possible. And really, we should have started it months ago, but at least if this motion is put to full council, it gives full council the opportunity, and if full council agree to the motion, we can start 9 o'clock the next morning. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Councillor Evans. I did have Councillor Pomfret raise his hand, but I now see it's down. Do you want to come in, Councillor Pomfret?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused over this because I thought we already had steps plans in hand to review the borough plan anyway. And as far as I can see, I mean, I'm not an expert on the borough plan, but these might sort of duplicate or cut across and cause a great deal of confusion. I don't know if anybody can enlighten me on that. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. Do you know of any plans to review the borough plan, appropriate officers? Catherine, do you know?
Yeah, there's a timetable for the review of the local plan in the local development scheme, and I understand that in the next municipal year calendar there are some dates for the local plan committee as well.
Okay, yeah, and of course the difference there is Councillor Evans' motion put forward a specific date for the work to start. Do we have any more speakers on the item? If not, then I'd like to... Oh, Councillor Hancock. Councillor Hancock, I see you've raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I take you back to the almost to the beginning of Catherine's report, I think she was quite clear that a further report would be coming out. And if you look on page 72, 4.6. It actually details that a further report will be coming back during this municipal year. So I'm not absolutely clear on it. But again, for the sake of clarity and consistency, and I guess that every councillor on this authority will have a bit in the local plan that was agreed by the government inspector that they don't like. But the reality is that plan was agreed by the inspector. It's been adopted by the council, and it now gives guidance to members of the council and members of the planning application committee on sites for development. There's different arguments when things come back in detail about design and infrastructure and all sorts of other things, but the local plan as it stands does give some clarity. I've got no problem with anybody talking to Country City Council or North Warwickshire or anybody else about it, but you know, all these figures were things that were decided between different authorities, and before anybody makes anything of it, I'll say of different political persuasions as well. So it's there. Now, again, I'll repeat that I don't have any access to the chat, but I did hear a date mentioned for July, and we've been criticised in the past when we look at dates like that are in the middle of summer. It's a bit different this year, but you know, I don't like being ambushed at meetings, And clearly there was a lot of detail in the proposal that was put forward that I can't check out in front of me. I think we've got enough, Chair, within the actual report that Catherine's done and the written report we've got, and that our comments can go to the Cabinet for consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got Councillors Kandaka and Councillor Wilson, so I'll go with Councillor Kandaka first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief point. The current borough plan is based upon modelling done on 2012 data, so it's actually 8 years old now, and the guidance is you should review things every 5 years. So at the point it was adopted, because it took so long to adopt, it was already overdue for renew, which is why it's urgent that we actually get this work going. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor Condicle. I've got Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the reason that Councillor Evans has put in the date that he has and quoted the relevant statutory regulations that he has is that those are the actual legal triggers to start off the legal mechanism of reviewing the borough plan. So it then starts the formal legal issues about reviewing the borough plan. And secondly, the inspector said in his report when he did approve the borough plan with modifications that the data was out of date and that we should do a review of the borough plan as soon as practicable. And I believe he actually set a deadline of when we should start to do that, if I remember rightly. That will be, by the time we actually start doing anything meaningful, be almost a year into that deadline for doing things by the time we get there. So we need to actually get off our backsides and actually start doing the work that the inspector said we should have been starting earlier, because it's actually our communities which are suffering from this inaction. And we've now got MS Teams up and running. All right, there are some various issues, but we've proven it can happen. We've done a planning applications committee, we've done an ONS. There is absolutely no reason why the local plan committee cannot meet and start doing the actual legal work that is required for a legal review of the borough plan ASAP. Now we've got teams in the current COVID crisis. So I think we need to endorse this motion and get it to council so that it can then be voted upon and we actually start getting things moving, Chair, because we've left things going for far too long already.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tandy?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard a lot of comments about how everything has been delayed. I've heard lots of comments about the fact that nothing has been happening, and I have to agree with them. Nothing has been happening for the last 3 months. And why has nothing been happening? Because we're not allowed to have any meetings. So let's not have a huge emphasis on this council having not done anything when all of us present here know exactly the reasons why. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Do we have any more on the item? If not, then I will open up discussion on the amendment, not the amendment, sorry, the motion. I've got Councillor Evans, and you're speaking on the motion.
Indeed. If the motion is about to be put, could I request that this be a recorded vote? Thank you.
Yeah, I would be happy for this to be a recorded vote. Do we have any more hands raised on the motion? Just checking. I see Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tandy.
Mike.
Councillor Tandy. I see you've put your hand down. Did you want to speak on this, or I can see you shaking your head, so I will assume that's a no. Okay, I will read out the motion that Councillor Evans has put forward. Let me just skip that up. This panel resolves to recommend to Council that it adopts the following motion. This Council resolves to request that the portfolio holder for planning and development requests the head of the planning department to commence a review of the Borough Plan on Thursday, 16th of July 2020, in accordance with Regulation 10A of the Town and Country Planning, in brackets, Local Planning England, Regulations 2012, as amended. So is everybody clear on the wording on that?
Yeah.
Are you ready to move to the vote, Chair?
I am, if everybody else is. So let's start the vote.
And we will record this as a recorded vote.
Excellent.
So if you could indicate whether you're for, against, or wish to abstain. Councillor Beaumont.
Abstain.
Councillor Croft. Councillor Hancox.
Against.
Councillor Elliott.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Councillor Evans.
Kyle Evans, for.
Councillor Glass. I can see JG, but I don't know whether Councillor Glass is in the room or not. Councillor Glass? Or it might be Julian, actually. Councillor Gran.
For.
Councillor Guttridge.
For.
Councillor Hocking.
Against.
Councillor Kandaka.
For.
Councillor Pomfret.
Against.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Tandy.
Against.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
I've got many, I think.
Okay, I count that as 7 in favour and 5 against, with 1 abstention. Is that
One
correct?
abstention. That's correct, Chair.
Excellent. Well, that's settled then. I'm ready to move on to the next agenda item. Let me just find the page. Yep. And that is flood risk and drainage. And I believe that there's a report that's been put forward by Catherine Morton. So if we can have a report now, then I'd appreciate it.
Can I actually join the meeting now?
Oh, hello, John. Glad you could join us.
A thousand million apologies to everybody, but I was saying something about how great this new setup was, and all of a sudden, you know, oh well.
Isn't it funny how we have to eat our words?
I think it's only as good as Eddie's using it. That's me.
Yes.
But never mind.
I'm happy to hand over chairmanship of the meeting over to you, Councillor Glass. We have started on agenda item 9, and just to update you, I'm not sure how long you've been with us. Catherine Morton, Head of Planning, Flood Risk and Drainage Report.
Yeah, this report was following a request by Scrutiny for Councillor Condacorn. It was originally at the times when we had large floods in the United Kingdom. But as can be seen from section 4, there are a range of bodies who have some responsibility around flood risk management. And section 4.15 sets out the limited role of Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, while section 5 sets out the role planning, both in local plans and planning applications, has in relation to flood risk. Given that the council has such a limited role in the flood risk management, in order for the panel to fully understand the role of others in the process, it is suggested that a further report be brought to the panel when representatives of the Environment Agency and or the local lead flood authority can also be invited. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody's got any.
Right, thanks for that, Seb. I'm sure I haven't missed anything.
Very well.
Right, anybody wish to support? And I've got Councillor Wilson first.
Thank you, Chair. As well as bringing the additional report later, the committee might find it useful to invite Warwickshire County Council to give a presentation on the works that they're doing, particularly around about Nuneaton and trying to remove Nuneaton Town Centre out of the flood zone, because at the get the terminology right, the Nuneaton Town Deal Board, the last one that we had pre-COVID, we actually had a presentation from officers about their draft works on how to actually try and alleviate the flood risk in the Nuneaton Town Centre, and the works that they were looking at doing. And to be honest, the works looked quite significant that they were proposing, and they're going out for funding to do so. So it might be interesting for members to actually have that presentation, and if possible, put our weight behind any funding bids that the county council might want to put forward to other departments, in particular Environment Agency, for example, and see what work is being done, because that would actually help us tremendously in terms of actually enabling works to happen within the town centre that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do under the current planning regulations. So that was a useful presentation that we had at the Nuneaton Town Deal Board, and members may find that beneficial. So I'd put that forward for members to consider and ask for that to come next time as well, Chair.
Yeah, well, I think we'll take that as part of the recommendations, if you don't mind. I've got another couple of councillors wishing to speak on this subject. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. First of all, I note on paragraph 155 of the MPPF that it does state very clearly that inappropriate development in areas of risk of flooding should be avoided by directing development away from the areas at high risk. Well, based on that, I have to question why the council decided to put HSG4 in the borough plan, but that's all been done and dusted now. One of the things I raised during the consultation on the supplementary planning documents to the borough plan was the lack of proposals on the HSG4 concept plan to mitigate flooding risks. And as I'm sure the head of planning, the head of the planning department will be aware, Warwickshire County Council's flooding team have actually recently objected to a planning application, 99 Woodlands Road, due to it being in a high area of flooding, a high risk area, should I say. So could you explain why there's no flooding mitigation measures included on the HSG4 concept plans? Thank you.
Catherine, could you answer that, please?
Because the concept plans mirror the policy in the local plan, and the local plan was based on the evidence at the time. The application that Councillor Evans is referring to is a smaller application. It's being looked at completely separate from HSG4.
Okay. Councillor Condicor, you have indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair. Glad to hear you again. We've got a big flooding problem in Nuneaton, and Nuneaton and Bedworth are unique, and Bedworth has a flooding problem. And between the two halves of the borough is a ridge, so everything on our side actually heads north, and everything from the Bedworth side heads south. So we've had a lot of flooding issues in Bedworth over the years. We have a big problem in town, which Chris Wilson mentioned the mitigation for. But I fear that that's going to actually add to the flooding problem in Weddington, because that plan is to take water along the canal and dump it down in Weddington near Cleaver Gardens, near Sandon Park. So the big problem with all these flooding issues is you have to do a wide area study, because if you're just trying to solve the problem in the Nuneaton town centre, then you move the water along the canal and dump it down onto the fields of Weddington. You just move the problem. So it's important that we actually model it all properly and we don't repeat the mistakes of the old. When we solved the Nuneaton town centre flooding problems, we built the flood relief, which was about 1972, 73, something like that. And what that did is it protected the town centre, but yet again moved more water into Weddington. So we do need that report of the town centre plans to make sure they're not just shifting the problem. The reason I asked for this, though, to come up was the new developments are having problems with flooding quite often on the boundary between the new development and the old development. And the first one this came up with on my patch was Bellway Phase 1, where the houses on the existing Buttermere estate started getting waterlogged gardens because the development raises ground levels. I believe there's trouble up on the top of the Longshoot as well in St Nicholas Ward, where Davidson's have raised the ground to make their development work, and that is causing flooding onto the top of the Watling Street. And what the developers want to do is, within their development, they want to have the sewers flow with gravity. So they raise the ground levels for all the houses to make their system work. and the county council is responsible for modelling that system. Unfortunately, they're not responsible for modelling the boundary, and because it's all done on 2D maps, when you raise the ground in one area, you can actually push the flood risk onto another area. So it's a big weakness we've got at the moment is the boundary effect of actually changing the ground levels on a development site. So the developments don't flood, but actually they then increase the flood risks on existing sites. So it'll be very useful getting the county council in to explain in planning terms when they said there won't be a flooding risk on a development, that actually means the sewers of the development. And it's actually quite a weak area in flood risk. Now all the responsibilities chopped up. What happens at the boundaries and what happens with changed ground levels? So it's a very live issue, flooding and developments. So I think a further report would be very useful, Chair. And also responsibility for lots of the watercourses. I think people need to understand who's responsible for Change Brook, where it changes from the borough council to the county council. And there is a massive weakness in that most things are responsibilities of several people. So when I've talked about the drainage issues in my ward, and I'm sure it's the same in parts of Bedworth, if the county council owns a highway and then it goes on to public open space, it's owned by the borough council, but it's a big enough thing to be Environment Agency main water course, you get 3 different people responsible for that water. It's a real problem.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Catherine, we're along with Councillor Wilson suggesting that the further report comes back with the county council being involved. That's not a particular problem, taking Councillor Condicord's things that he said into consideration at the same time.
No, it's not. The county council are the local lead flood authority, but they're also and they respond on planning applications. And I think it's right that they come and they're able to do a presentation on both things, how they look at plans and planning applications and what plans they have for the town centre. It may be 2 different people, but certainly I can request that they attend the next meeting.
Okay, does that find favour with everybody? I can't see anybody else who's that's willing to, who's got their hand up to speak. Do we all agree with that process, and we'll take it forward to a future meeting? Yep. Okay, thanks for that. Item number 10, integral performance reports. Who's taking that? Are you taking that, Phil?
Yes, Chair. As is always the case, it'll be, I think, more a case of questions and answers rather than running through the whole of the report. I'm hoping members will have had a chance to have looked at it. I always, as a matter of principle now, always refer to paragraph 3 of the main report, which is on page 86, just to confirm that there have been no covert surveillance operations authorised under RIPA. So we haven't done any. Other than that, Chair, you have got a series of charts and some fairly rudimentary explanations of some of the outcomes that have been recorded. I should add, Chair, this is up to December, so we are pre-COVID in this report. So your next one, when you get it, will be, I think, quite significantly different when you see it. But it is the position as it was at the end of Q3, which is December. So I'm happy to try and answer questions or take questions away and send answers back to members. I know Kevin is here as well, so if Kevin can assist, we will endeavour between us to support you and give the answers if we can.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got 2 councillors indicated at the present moment. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I've got a few things, so with your permission, I'll just do them together rather than unmuting and muting. First thing I've got to say is with regards to the chart on page 91 about the parks contract monitoring and satisfaction. Obviously, I just wanted to reiterate the points earlier that there's not much point putting in the customer satisfaction levels in this chart because the data is just so insignificant. I mean, we're talking about 2 or 4 responses, so I don't think that data reflects much, to be honest. My next 2 points are regarding the Civic Hall, which is on page 93. Satisfaction with council promoted shows. I don't know if Kevin is still in here. He may wish to answer these points. So page 93 gives a breakdown of the satisfaction levels regarding council promoted shows at the Civic Hall. Are you able just to explain how you get this data? You know, do you give people customer satisfaction response forms? How are those distributed? I.e., are they, given to people on their way out of performances? And do you actively put these response forms online for people to fill out? Because I know that for the last 2 financial years, the satisfaction response rate has been 100%. Now, if we've had responses, a significant number of responses back, and it's been 100% satisfaction rate, then we need to pay tribute to the staff at the Civic Hall for achieving that level. But if it's based on 2 responses, I don't know how significant we can really look at that. Which leads me to my next point. Does the Civic Hall work on the assumption, like Glendale, well, not Glendale, but like the Parks Department, that if a customer does not return a response form, does that mean that the council works on the assumption that they must be satisfied with the show? So I just wondered if you could clarify that. And my final question is in relation to page 156, which refers to our exit from the European Union as a potential risk for the council. I'm sure there's a number of different views on this matter, and I won't go into that. But if the council deems Brexit to be a risk to the council, did the council therefore apply for the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government's Brexit Preparation Fund, which was a fund worth up to £57 million? And if the council did not apply for this funding, is it in order to describe Brexit as a risk to the council? And also, my last question regarding this matter, the government gives guidance to local authorities that they should appoint a Brexit lead officer, or whatever you want to call it. I know that position has been held by Ian Powell, but obviously I think he retired last week or the week before. So I just wondered if we could have an update on which director now has that position. Thank you.
Did Philip, are you going to answer, or is Kevin or somebody else going to answer?
Well, if I kick off, Chair,
okay,
and then Kevin can jump in. Because I don't know the answer on the Civic Hall questions. I don't know whether Kevin does, but he might have a better idea. I'm not going to say too much about customer satisfaction in terms of parks, Chair, because you've already had a fairly lengthy discussion around that. One thing I would add, though, and it hasn't come up in the conversations or the debate with members, the customer satisfaction cards that go to the members of the public make it explicitly clear to all members, all recipients, that if they don't return the card, it will be treated as a positive statement. So there's no assumption about the return. It is very clearly stated on the card. However, I take the point, and I think we've raised this to this panel before, that we don't get many cards back one way or another, and that there must be a better way of doing it. And I think at one point we were suggesting doing a more web-based, where members could just log in and click a button to say, yes, I'm happy, or no, I'm not. But whether it's apathy, or whatever, it is what it is. But certainly there are better ways to do it. Just to come to the risk register, obviously when this was done, I think Brexit was new, and it still is new. It's not gone away. It's kind of been overshadowed by other matters at the moment. But until we know where we are in terms of whether we have a deal or not, or what the impacts of that are going to be, I think it's a risk that we have to acknowledge, because we don't know what the impacts will be on income generation or on the economy, and therefore I think we have to acknowledge that it is still an unknown and therefore has to be managed. Ian retired on the 26th of May, I think it was. So we haven't yet identified a replacement. In part, Ian was identified as the Brexit officer because it was he was responsible for disaster recovery and through the local resilience forum, and it was on the basis that there would be potentially quite significant issues around supply chain that led to his appointment to that particular role. So I think we'll have to take that away and look at it from the point of view as to where are we now and what would we need to be doing in terms of Brexit preparation. And just to sort of finish that point, obviously with other matters, the LRF has scaled down its Brexit considerations at this stage. Obviously, as we get closer to the end of the year and we know where we are in terms of what sort of shape any arrangements between ourselves and the rest of Europe are, that will give us a bit more of an indication, I think, as to whether or not we'll need to scale things back up again. But that's where we are at the moment. I don't know whether Kevin wants to pick up on the Civic Hall questions.
Kevin, are you there?
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Chair. I don't have that exact detail, Councillor Evans, but what I will do is follow that up and come back to you after the meeting. Thank you.
Could I say before you go, Kevin? I don't know whether anybody did it before, but congratulations on your promotion, and look forward to a bright future, shall we say?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Condacor, you have indicated to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure Kevin should be congratulated because it's going to be a hard job for the next 6 months, as just about everything is in such a state of collapse and chaos. So it's probably not a good time to have this new post. In terms of the report itself, to start with, Philip mentioned no covert surveillance. One of the things that was supposed to happen is the cameras for fly tipping. We've had continuous fly tipping across the borough, and we keep getting told, don't worry, we're going to put some signs up and we're going to have some overt cameras so they're not in a problem with the Reaper rules. But we've had no feedback as to the anti-fly tipping cameras if they're happened. Most of this report is total junk because it's 6 months old, which normally wouldn't be very good, but it's the wrong side of a disaster. Yeah, all the parameters in this are a total waste of time going through because so much has changed. Your car parking, theatre attendance. We should have had a far shorter report that actually said what we're doing about the COVID recovery and where things are, rather than a report what happened before Christmas. So I'm not going to go through the detail of this, but the strategic risk register should have been our friend as this disaster started to happen. It should have been updated before it's almost like as you approach the iceberg, you start thinking, what do we need to do if it makes the ship start to sink? And unfortunately, the risk register hasn't been updated, so it wasn't there to actually start to look at where do we do this, where do we do that. And we are in an almighty risk for employment at the moment. They're talking about 100,000 job losses in Coventry and Warwickshire. Obviously, a lot of those will come back quite quickly, hopefully, but an awful lot won't. So we really need to be talking about that sort of economic recovery stuff as a priority, rather than going through the minutiae of what happened 6 months ago in a very, very different world. Thank you, Chair.
The only thing I would say in that, Councillor, is that these minutes were actually set up for before what has actually happened. So we're just tying things up. to go forward, I'm sure we'll be dealing with some of the questions you've been asked. But this is just a follow-up from basically the last cancelled meeting. So I'm assuming that as we go forward, we can deal with well, hopefully we can deal with the particular things of COVID-19 and take it forward from there in a positive manner. Councillor Gran.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, do I have the
I'd
answer
like to
to
bring
my...
up a few points.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't get an answer to my question about the cameras for...
Oh,
sorry, Chair. Just
my
to say,
apologies,
I
sorry.
don't know whether it's happened or not. I'll have to ask the question and send a note back to Councillor Kandaka. But obviously, as he says, that's not a covert surveillance issue. That would be an overt and therefore legitimate and not requiring of formal authority.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gran.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise a few matters. Appendix A on page 87. I'm looking at the Freedom of Information request and complaint summary for the last quarter. And it seems to me that there's about a 20% late for complaints and no, it's 20% for Freedom of Information requests being delayed past the 20 days, and about well, yeah, 20%-ish for both with my C-grade maths skills. But we've got nothing to compare it to from previous quarters on here, but that still seems quite high to me, and I'd like an explanation for how so many aren't meeting their targets. I understand that not all of them can, depending on the complexity of what's being asked or what's being complained about. But perhaps if there were criteria for explainable delays and delays that are unjustifiable, because I know that's really difficult. It's just quite worrying for me, considering transparency issues in the past. I'd like to bring up the parks contract monitoring as well. I've noticed quite a big difference, and we've talked about grounds, how we gather this information, and that we're not completely happy with the way that's done at the moment, but which makes it even more interesting that the informal areas have a considerably lower satisfaction rate. I mean, in the third quarter of 2019-20, 48%, and as we were discussing area, that includes areas like the Slough and my own wards, as was raised earlier. So I think that indicates that we need to be investing more and showing more support in our informal areas. I would like to understand the particular challenges we had in the third quarter of 1920, because that's considerably lower than the 73% we see later. And I don't remember it being as low as 48% in the past. So perhaps if Kevin's able to enlighten me on that, that'd be helpful. No, Carl's already raised that, so I don't need to. I think that's about it. Oh, no. Household waste collected. I've noticed an 8% drop in the amount recycling, and a significant, well, not as, it's still quite a big rise in what's being classed as household waste collected. That indicates to me that a lot less recycling has been happening between 2018-19 and 2019-20. Is this due to any policy change that we've made? Is it a nationwide trend? Or have we got a specific issue in the borough? I'd like to hear the officers' professional opinions on those matters.
Who would like to take the items first?
Again, Chair, if you're okay, if I kick off.
Okay.
And then I'll chuck it over to Kevin. Yes, first in terms of the FOIs and the complaints, we'll have to come back to you on the detail, simply because what we're measuring there is the sort of, if you like, the standard time period for a complaint to be processed. What that doesn't necessarily mean is that it's not been dealt with within an agreed time frame. In other words, there is the ability to ask for more time, both under FOI and in the complaints procedure. And what I'll need to do is to check and see whether or not that's what's happened there. And we're just measuring it's 20 days or 40 days or whatever it is. So I'll need to bring that back if that's okay.
Can that be measured in future for the OSP, Philip? Because that would help give some context to the figures we're seeing.
I'll ask Chris. Obviously, Chris Tideman has responsibility for these figures, so I'll ask Chris to see whether or not we can give more granularity to it, so you can better understand it. I've also noted the, like-for-like comparison over different quarters, so that you can see whether things are improving or deteriorating, as the case may be. So I'll raise that with Chris at the same time. In terms of parks monitoring, if I could just remind you of what David said, because I suspect that the 48% is a direct correlation to the number of rectification notices that David referred to earlier when he was talking about the Glendale contract in October. This is a backward looking back from that period. So invariably, with informal areas, we only measure informal areas against 4 or 5 criteria. So if you miss on one, you'll drop to 75% almost instantly. So depending on how it's been scored by the case officer when doing their inspection, could lead to quite a big shift in performance. But I accept that 48% has never been as low as that. So and as David said, it's probably related to the cut and collect, because there were some issues with cut and collect on the informal areas, as you may know, because of course the Nook is one of those areas as well, which is classed as informal. I don't know. I don't know whether Kevin wants to come in on that at this stage, and if he's got anything to add.
I've seen him pop up.
Chair, no, I haven't. Phil, what I would do is ask if David, there was anything else you wanted to add to that in terms of feedback, David.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Yes, there were particular issues at that time of year in that third quarter, particularly relating to the cut and collect operation, and you can see that that's actually reflected in the number of rectification notices that were issued at the time. And obviously that is something that we will be continuing to monitor as we go forward with the new contract.
Yeah. In that case, sorry, Philip.
Sorry, no, if you want to carry on, I was going to come on to the recycling question, but if you've got something.
Yeah, this is on this second point. For the next OSP, would it be possible to firstly have some sort of report on the events regarding the grass cutting, fiasco? Maybe that's too dramatic a word, I don't know, we'll wait for the report. But since that seems to be a one-off blip, I think it would be important for us to understand the reasons behind that for future reference. Also, with regards to the 5 criteria that we measure it against, I'm not familiar with what those criteria are, and I'm not sure how many other members of the panel are. I mean, perhaps I'm alone there, but in future, could that be included as a footnote underneath the statistics for parks contract monitoring? Because, and in general, I think it should be when we're to better contextualise the figures that we're given. Because good and bad, can be quite simplistic. Sometimes there's a bit in between, and there's reasons for the good and the bad. Hello?
I'm just wondering if David wants to just affirm or.
Sorry.
You're muted, David. Oh.
Does he know he's muted?
Sorry for the delay. So my machine seems to be slowing down. I agree that a better understanding of what the criteria relates to the type and number of operations that are generally undertaken, and typically you will not see as many operations undertaken on an informal area, simply by virtue of the nature of the sites themselves. So whereas on a formal site, you will typically see a significant number of operations being undertaken relating to the type of grass cutting. It has sports facilities and other activities going on, which generates a significant number of areas to be assessed. On a informal site, the number of operations that take place is typically significantly less. So you will have things like your grass cutting, litter collection, and so on and so forth. But you won't get those other items because you don't have things like sports facilities on them. So we can certainly look at that because it would allow members to get a better understanding of what underpins those variations.
So we can include the criteria in future versions of this report.
I believe so, yes.
Excellent. And the other thing I asked is if it would be possible to have a specific report about this grass collection issue that we had in the third quarter.
Yeah, certainly. I will look into that and come back to you.
Fantastic. The next meeting.
Do you want me to carry on, Chair?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not chairing anymore.
Chair, there is a matter that we need to address urgently. Can I move a suspension of standing orders to enable us to complete the business, because we have been going for 3 hours?
Seconded.
Yeah.
Wendy? Is Councillor Glass still in the meeting?
I'm just checking that. I think he may have dropped out again, I'm afraid. Yes, I think he's dropped out.
In which case, Councillor Grand, do you want to take the vote on? I mean, you can do it by affirmation. You don't need to take the full vote. Presumably, members.
I'll just assume that we're chairing on a rotational basis.
Yes, I think you'd have to.
Yes, I would like to take the vote on that. We had a proposer and a seconder. We didn't have any more speakers on that, did we? To my knowledge, no.
I was just going to answer your question on recycling, but if you want.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, Joe, as it says in the if you look in the comments underneath the indicator, the charts, it does seem to suggest that the targets have had to be reviewed in view of the impact of the green waste collection charge. So I can only assume that there has been some reduction in recycling as a result of introduction of green waste charging. What I will do, though, Chair, is I will clarify those figures for you with Glenn McGrandle and circulate a note to all members of the panel just to clarify.
Sorry to interrupt you, Phil, but I've just noticed that I think Councillor Gran has just dropped out of the attendance list. I'm just seeing if he's going to pop back in.
I can also see that Councillor Glass has joined us again.
Okay.
Chair, I think wherever's chair, I think the batteries are running out on everyone's kits. So it might be worth finishing soon.
Is Councillor Glass, you're muted, but are you back in? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Philip. Sorry.
I think Councillor Grand took over for you in your slight absence, but now he's slipped off as well. So I think we're at the point we have no speakers on this item. We've dealt with all issues. Unless any other member wishes to speak, we've got a number of things to report back on, but I don't know whether any member has any specific.
I'm here. I got a message saying I was kicked from the meeting, but I'm here.
Yeah, I've actually appeared as well for some reason.
We are rotating, aren't we?
Yeah. Modern technology, yeah. So we're going to take that as the panel's requested comment and note the content of the report. So we take the things into consideration that all the councillors have said and deal with it through that way.
Yes,
Councillor
Chair,
Evans, I believe you've got your hand up again.
Chair, given the time, can we go straight to the vote on the suspension of council procedural rules, please?
Everybody is everybody in favour of extending the meeting for the last 1, 2, 3 items?
Yes,
Get it
Chair.
finished over tonight.
Yes, Chair.
Everybody
Yes,
in
Chair.
favour of that, we think.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor
agreed.
Sandys, did you indicate?
Yeah.
No, I haven't, Chair. I'm going to have this looked at because I haven't even picked the mouse up and everything's just popping up in front of me.
Well, I think it's the case of that we've had a few problems. So can we agree to finish the items on the report so we can make progress?
Yes, Chair. You can do it by affirmation. If no member wishes to object, then you can just move on.
Nobody wishing to object to that? No. In that case, we'll move on then. The next item is the forward plan, which was for information only. And then that takes us up to item number 12, the draft work programme. So there's well, anybody who's willing to put some new items up for the further work programme, I'm sure that they can be dealt with in the regular manner. Does that find favour with everybody? Councillor Condicor, I've got your hand.
Yeah, considering what's happening with COVID and so much going on, I think it may be worth having an extra meeting in sort of 3 or 4 weeks' time, just a COVID meeting, just to get updated and ask questions on what the council's doing. Because with this meeting we haven't really managed to talk about that, and there's so much going on that I think 3 or 4 weeks' time we should be starting the recovery process and should have some scrutiny of where we are and where we're going.
Does that find favour with everybody? I'm sure we should be able to have a look at an up-to-date position in a couple of 3 months' time to see if we're actually going with the national situation as well as the local situation.
Chair,
I find favour with everybody.
Chair, I said 3 or 4 weeks, not months.
Oh, 3 or 4 weeks. Oh, sorry. Perhaps 3 or 4 weeks might be a wee bit too quick. Well, can I have a look at the diaries and we can see whether we can fit a special one in just have a look at that. Does that find favour with everybody?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
As soon as possible, yeah?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you for that. And last but one, this is a report that was compiled by the panel 2019 to 2020. That's the stuff that we actually did that year, which is surprising that we didn't actually more of what I thought we were going to do. Councillor Evans, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would. I do have a brief point regarding this. Thank you for typing this up for us. The very last entry on page 195 is regarding a scrutiny item that I suggested to the panel many months ago now, that we look at the accessibility of the council's planning portal. You may recall, and it is noted in your report that you've typed up, that the panel agreed. Sorry. Okay. The panel agreed to make a recommendation to the portfolio holder for planning that he request the council's communications team to create a video telling people how to navigate the system. Now, when I last asked the portfolio holder for an update on this during cabinet questions at the last full council, my honest opinion was that he wasn't really that bothered about the matter. Now, this was a unanimous decision by this panel. So actually, Chair, I'd like to move a recommendation to this report, and I'm happy as it's printed, but I'd like to move an additional recommendation, and I will copy and paste it into the comment section. This panel resolves to recommend to council that it adopts the following motion. This council resolves to request that the portfolio holder for planning and development requests the council's communications team to put together, to put a video together informing people how to navigate the council's planning portal. I'm just going to insert that into the comments section. I think it needs debate at full council again. So that's why I'm moving the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. What's the panel's?
I'm happy second that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Grant. Anybody else wish to speak on the matter? Nope. Okay. Oh, Councillor Hancock's.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I understand what Councillor Evans is saying, but if he's unhappy that he's not had a response from the portfolio holder, then it should be taken up with the portfolio holder. I think what he's suggesting is already covered in that thing on page 195. I don't think we actually need to go down that route again. If he's unhappy that the cabinet member hasn't got back to him, then okay, it's about looking to see whether the video is possible in the sense of informing people better. That's my personal view on it, Chair. You know, I'm not a regular member of this panel, but I think he should take it up with the cabinet member.
Councillor, I'm just right there. Condacor.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I ask if we do these reports again, it's in bigger writing, because at my sort of age, I'm needing glasses and I cannot do anything at that font size. I think there are still issues with the planning portal we've got, and rather than go around this requesting members and making videos, I think we might have a look at actually what improvements need to be made to make it more user friendly, because I find it deeply annoying that it only lets you download one document at a time and they're badly named, and yeah, for big applications it is a right pain, and finding things. The weekly list, you can't click on things, so there's lots of issues, but I think the issues need sorting rather than a video making.
Okay. Councillor Evans.
So, Chair, I've got my hand up by accident, but
Okay.
yeah, I know the comments by Councillor Hancock's and Councillor Condacor, but I think my own opinion is that this panel agreed a recommendation when it last met, and that was voted upon unanimously by members. And you know, the portfolio holder is yet to act on that recommendation. So actually, in my opinion, we need to hold the portfolio holder to account and have a debate at full council. So that's why I'm moving this recommendation. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak on the subject? No. So I think Councillor Grant, you seconded the motion, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's right. So it's a straightforward for and against, as simple as that, is it? Philip, I believe that you've got to go through the process of
I'll do the roll call, Chair. I will do the roll call. So
Okay.
could members vote for and against? So Councillor Beaumont?
Against.
Councillor Croft?
For.
Councillor Hancock?
Against.
Councillor Elliott?
Against.
Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Glass?
Against.
Councillor Gran?
For.
Councillor Guttridge?
For.
Councillor Hocking?
Against.
Councillor Kandaka?
Against.
Councillor Pomfret?
Against.
Councillor Sargent?
For.
Councillor Tandy?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
I make that 6, 4 and 8 against, Chair.
Okay, so that falls in. So the minute stands as it is. Okay.
The minutes.
The report.
The report signed. Sorry, rather a minute. Sorry. Right, no further on that. Then we go on to any other matters, and I don't know what it was mentioned before, but I've only got one any other matter at the panel thing. Is that I understand Lynn Price has finished. She's retired. She's standing down as a borough rep. Is it the panel's? Well, it is my wish. Is it the panel's wish also to send Lynn a note to say thank you for her services over the year and wish her all the best in the future?
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah.
We'll agree with that then. So Wendy, could you do that for us, please? And at that point, 1,000 apologies once again. I'm presuming we'll get used to this technology sooner or later, but I'd like to thank you all for your forbearance and for I apologise for my tardiness. So at that point, I would like to close the meeting. Peter, I understand